Well, on election night, one of the key seats to watch in Queensland will be here in the Far North. For 26 of the last 29 years, voters in the Leichhardt electorate have elected the same man, the LNP's Warren Entsch, but he's retiring, throwing the race wide open. Twice the size of Tasmania, Leichhardt is a vast and diverse electorate. Beyond the northern tip of Queensland, it takes in the Torres Strait Islands. More than half a dozen Aboriginal communities are scattered through the Cape. On the west coast is the mining town of Weipa. On the east, the spectacular Daintree rainforest, the sugar milling town of Mossman and the beach resorts of Port Douglas. But the big population base is in the city of Cairns. 80% of Leichhardt's voters live here. For nearly 3 decades, their federal member has been the LNP's Warren Entsch. This is him in 1996, the year he was first elected.
I'm Warren Entsch and I'm standing for Leichhardt.
And this is him now, with the man hoping to succeed him, former paramedic Jeremy Neal.
We're very, very focused on making sure that taxpayers get value for money.
After a long career, Mr Entsch is retiring. And with his departure, Labor senses an opportunity. It's pre-selected former Cairns Taipans basketball player Matt Smith.
We know that supporting the reef means supporting jobs for Far North Queensland.
But it's a crowded race with 10 candidates on the ballot paper. So what is motivating people at the ballot box here in Cairns? Let's find out.
Definitely cost of living, because at the moment my wage pretty much pays my rent and that's about it.
Crime around Cairns is pretty important to us, making sure we feel safe in our own houses.
For me it's healthcare, 100%, and housing in remote Indigenous communities.
Probably sound economic management.
Free or lower HECS.
Protection of our assets, Australian assets, is important, like no foreign ownership.
Everything that Labor's doing is a flaming mess.
What was the thing right at the top of your mind?
The environment, climate change.
For the first time in years, I've just completely undecided, Yeah.
Why is that?
Oh, I just, don't want nuclear power, and I don't want the guy that tried to get the voice in the referendum.
You're not impressed by any of them?
No, not really.
Well, Leichhardt has one of the biggest Indigenous populations in the country, but around Queensland, First Nations leaders have expressed dismay at what they say is a lack of political will to focus on Indigenous policy since the failed Voice referendum. They're calling on politicians to combat deepening division.
Ingrained in the lush landscapes of Mungalla Station in North Queensland is a rich history.
It's Dash. It's my daughter's horse.
For 2 decades, Nwagi traditional owner Jacob Cassidy has run cultural tours about the site's colonial history.
That's where the old homestead site was.
While spearheading the regeneration of the land.
Yeah, they're magnificent old trees, these things.
It's a long way from the halls of Parliament House. But there's no escaping politics. Jacob Cassidy believes the country is at a crossroads.
Aboriginal people have been used as political football for many, many years. And I think those embers of racism that were evident in that colonisation period, the fans are blowing those winds of racism across this country again.
When Anthony Albanese claimed victory at the 2022 federal election, Indigenous recognition was front and centre.
On behalf of the Australian Labor Party, I commit to the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full.
But 3 years on, and after the failed Voice to Parliament referendum, the political tone has shifted.
The government has basically no appetite for Indigenous rights recognition at the moment, and there's been a strong pivot towards economic initiatives.
In Queensland, the new LNP state government has scrapped the truth-telling inquiry and path to treaty process, and federal opposition leader Peter Dutton has refused to stand in front of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags if elected Prime Minister.
There seems to be some kind of conservative backlash internationally against Indigenous rights. And this seems to be all stemming from, I guess, Trumpism in the United States.
Advocates are urging political leaders to not abandon First Nations people.
What we're seeing is not a lot of commitment to the policies and programs that stop the appalling rates of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children hitting justice systems and protection systems.
For communities like Palm Island off the North Queensland coast, the priorities are clear.
We still have more work to do, particularly for livability, cost of living in our communities, better freight subsidies, certainly better grocery prices and housing in our community, because overcrowding continues to plague us.
On Mungalla Station, Jacob Cassidy worries about the toll of community division on the next generation.
I've always been proud of the fact that Australia has been a place of a fair go for all, and I hope we continue down that path.
Well, for decades, this electorate of Leichhardt has been represented by the LNP's Warren Entsch, but he's also had a high national profile, campaigning for things like same-sex marriage and mental health. And now, on the cusp of retirement, Mr Entsch joins me. Mr Entsch, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Pleasure.
Can I take you right back to your very first speech to Parliament, and you were reflecting on some of your previous careers as a wild bull catcher and a crocodile trapper, and you said that you thought those occupations would hold you in good stead in the political process in Canberra. Did that turn out to be true?
Actually, I found it to be totally incorrect.
Oh, really?
Particularly, everybody says, wild bulls and crocodiles, you're ready for anything. But I didn't understand the political process. And at least I could predict what these guys were going to do. When you step in with them, you know exactly what they're going to do. In the political sphere, of course, it's totally different. Pat you on the shoulder and then get stuck into you behind your back. So it was a learning curve, but something that I've enjoyed immensely. And, I think 26 years, 30 years in politics, but 26 years. And, I'm proud of what I've been able to achieve. So it's time to hand on the baton to another generation.
And do you think the LNP can hang on in Leichhardt?
Well, I hope so. I mean, when I stepped down and with the calling of the election on the 28th, I was quite confident not only that we'd win, but we would also get an LNP government. But I think it's really hardened now, and I mean, it's a difficult one to call.
The opinion polls aren't looking great nationally.
Yeah, well, I've always argued against opinion polls, but nevertheless, just the general feeling, for example, the number of people that are coming out, and I know every election it gets more and more in the pre-polling, but the number of people that already know what exactly they're going to do, and they're not interested in any of the handouts, they just go straight in and they do it, and so it's very hard to read. And so I just say at this stage, I think it's going to be very hard to call.
Line ball.
Absolutely.
Has Peter Dutton run a good campaign?
Look, at times he's been good, but there are other times when there's been errors. But I mean, I can say that on both sides. I mean, I've had the Prime Minister up here on a couple of occasions in both times. He's been just totally dishonest with the public, and I've called him out on that. And as I remind the Prime Minister, what we need to hear about what's happening here. We're not interested in the political nonsense, and we're not interested in the mistruths, and both on the Daintree and also in my relationship in relation to the candidate. It wasn't necessary, but nevertheless he decided to do that. And so, I have to say that I'm very disappointed with that as well. But, it has been a very difficult election. I think there's been too much negativity. I mean, no doubt about it, cost of living, housing, and these issues are serious, and they are a main focus. Interesting, they've also taken over from environment. Here we are, right next to the reef, and we've hardly even heard about the reef.
Indeed.
And so,
Mr Entsch, all the best in your retirement, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Cheerio.